Last time we left off, we were talking about the election of 1860, right? And in this election, who won? Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln wins the election of 1860, and he becomes what kind of president? We talked about him becoming two kinds of presidents. He was a minority president, and he was a sectional president. And who can raise their hand and explain to me why he was a minority president one more time? Okay, so Abel, why is he a minority president? Only 40% of the population voted for him, but more importantly, it's not the 40% that I care about. It's the fact that what? 60% wanted someone else to be president of the United States. So does that make him a strong president or a weak president? He's a weak president because 60% wanted the other guys. So clearly he's not going to be a very strong president. We also called him a sectional president. Why is he called a sectional president? Yeah. Only the North voted for him. Did anyone in the South vote for him? Not a single person. And who can raise their hand and tell me why no one in the South voted for him? Joseph?
They didn't have him on their ballot.
He wasn't even on the Southern ballot. So what does it suggest? Again, this is the important part. What does it suggest when a man can become president without having to win any Southern states? What does that suggest about the South if you can be president and completely ignore the needs of the South? What is the implication of that? Giovanni?
They're weak. Their vote doesn't count.
Yeah, they have no political voice. They almost have no electoral voice. Like they have no political power whatsoever. And if you live in a government in which you can be completely ignored and the government can still roll forward, what are you going to think to yourself? Do I still need to be a part of this country? Should I still be here? If I can remain part of the South and you never hear my voice, then guess what, folks? I don't even need to be here. So, when Lincoln becomes president, in December 1860, not too long after Lincoln gets elected, the first state to secede is who? South Carolina. So in December 1860, South Carolina secedes. And by January 1861, 5 other states follow. My apologies, 6 other states follow. And they form what new government? The Confederate States of America, the CSA. So in December 1860, South Carolina secedes. And by January 1861, 6 other states follow. And they form the Confederate States of America. In this new government, this Confederate States of America, they name who as their president? Who becomes the president of the Confederate States of America? Jefferson Davis is named the president of the Confederate States of America. By the way, folks, we don't officially count Jefferson Davis as president of anything. He doesn't count when we think about the presidents of the United States. He's just some guy who thought he was president. But he was never officially president of anything. Because did the Confederate States of America actually break away? No. They were just in rebellion. And so Jefferson Davis is named president of the Confederate States of America. Good so far? Now, interestingly enough, when Jefferson Davis was asked about this whole idea of secession, he said the following. You don't have to write this down, but I want you to know why they were fighting. Here's why they seceded, and here's what he said. I tried all in my power to avert this war. I saw it coming. For 12 years I worked night and day to prevent it, but I could not. The North was mad and blind. It would not let us govern ourselves, and so the war came, and now it must go on till the last man of this generation falls in his tracks, and his children seize the musket and fight our battle, unless you acknowledge our right to self-government. We are not fighting for slavery. We are fighting for independence, and that or extermination. And so first off, Jefferson Davis is arguing, does he want this war? No, he doesn't want war. In fact, he tried to prevent it, but he says, who's at fault here? The North. It's their fault. They're the ones who are mad and blind, trying to take away our way of life. And ultimately, what is he saying this war is about? What is this? What are they fighting for? They're fighting for self-government. And this is something you guys have to understand. The war was fought for self-government. That's why this war was fought. It is not fought for what? It's not fought to keep slavery. Slavery might be part of it, but this war was not fought so we could keep our slaves. This war was fought so we can choose whether or not to keep our slaves. Does that make sense, folks? You in the North do not have the right to tell us whether we can or cannot have slaves. Whose choice should that belong to? To us. Us Southerners. We get to make that choice. So do not be mistaken. This is not a war for slavery. This is a war to be able to decide for ourselves what type of government we get to have. We're not fighting for slavery. We are fighting for self-government. So don't be mistaken, folks. When people ask you why was the Civil War fought, if they slavery, you say no. It was not fought for slavery. Even the North will say it was not fought for slavery. The reason why the Civil War was fought, according to the South, was for self-government, for states' rights. That's why they fought. Does that make sense to everyone? So when asked, why did the South secede? States' rights. They fought for self-government. That's why. Is that clear for everyone? Because again, the easy answer is, slavery. That's not the right answer, though. It's the easy one. That's the one they teach you in 5th grade, 8th grade, but that's not the correct answer. And so, folks, secession was a trap for Lincoln, though, because once the South seceded, did Lincoln have to make a choice? Either we can let them go, or we can fight to bring them back, but then that means that Lincoln is the guy who started the Civil War. So Lincoln now has a choice to make here. Nonetheless, again, the South does break away like you see here. And at the time, could Lincoln do anything to stop these states from breaking away? Why not? He wasn't even president yet. And so who should have done something? President Buchanan. But President Buchanan did nothing. President Buchanan did not stop Southern secession. President Buchanan did not stop Southern secession. And he didn't stop Southern secession because he thought secession was constitutional. He thought secession was constitutional. And so he just sat there and did absolutely nothing. And so he was known as a lame duck president. Because from November until March, he did nothing. He did nothing because is he going to be president for much longer? So does he really have that much political power? No, people are going to ignore him because they don't need him anymore. The next guy is coming into office pretty soon. Why am I going to follow Buchanan? So Buchanan did absolutely nothing. And what about Lincoln? Can Lincoln do anything? Lincoln just sits there like, I want to stop this. I want to stop them from seceding. But Lincoln has no power. And Buchanan just sits there doing nothing. And Lincoln is livid because there's nothing he can do about it. All he can do is watch the South secede, and he just gets to watch and then wonder, oh, great, I'm going to have to deal with that when I could have stopped it right now. And so Buchanan is a lame duck president who does nothing. Again, he had lockjaw. You know what lockjaw is? When you can't talk because your jaw is locked? That's pretty much what they're saying about Buchanan. He didn't say anything, speak about anything. He just let the South secede and just let it go. That's like if someone's stealing your car and you just let it go. Like, stop that guy! No, it's not really my car. I let you borrow it, so go deal with it. So anyway, folks, he's a lame duck president. There is one last chance to try to save the Union. This is called the Crittenden Compromise. So in 1860, Congress tries to pass the Crittenden Compromise. But this is a failed attempt. This is a failed attempt. Do me a favor, folks. If you guys have bags on your table, can you put them on the floor, please? If you have bags on your tables, put those on the floor, please. Thank you. So, the Crittenden Compromise was a failed compromise. It was a failed compromise. They tried, but this is really not going to work. What they did was they tried to restore the 3630 line. They tried to restore the 3630 line. And what they said now was, hey, what if we bring back that 3630 line and everything above will be what? Free. But what are they going to add that wasn't there before? Now, what's the other part that wasn't included in the Missouri Compromise? Everything below will be slave. Because before, wasn't that how California became a free state? Because they didn't make that clear. So they said, how about this? From now on, everything above will be free, but everything below has to be slave, and we'll bring it back to the way things were, just like they were in the good times when we had the Missouri Compromise. But Lincoln refused, as did the rest of most people. They said no. And this failed. Because, folks, even if this passed, would the Civil War still have happened eventually? Yeah. Because Lincoln said something very famous earlier on. And he said, a house divided, what? Cannot stand. A house divided cannot stand. He said, can we live in perpetuity as a slave and free country? Can we live that way forever? No. Are these two opposing forces going to tear our country apart? So we can't live forever as a house divided. A house divided cannot stand. We cannot live in perpetuity as a free and slave country. Eventually, we're going to have to make a choice. So, is this going to help matters? He said no. So I'm not going to approve something like this. This is not what needs to be done. And so the Crittenden Compromise fails. And really, folks, it was too little too late. I mean, had they proposed this maybe a few years ago, maybe it would have helped a little. But by this time, the South has already seceded. Are they going to come back just for this? No. So the South secedes. So let's talk about questions of secession. Questions of secession, then. Excuse me. The first question is, why did the South secede? Why did the South secede? Well, a few reasons. Number one, they felt that the North would dominate the South. They felt the North would dominate the South in Congress. Because who has a bigger population? The North. And so they said, there's no way that we'll be able to win in votes. So they said the North would dominate the South in Congress, and they just didn't like that. Number two, they said that they had no political power in the presidency. They said they had no political power in the presidency. They said they had no political power in the presidency. How do we know? In the election of 1860, no one voted, and he still won. So they have no political power in the presidency. Third reason, they don't even need the North. Why? Cotton is king. The third reason, cotton is king. And what made them think that cotton was king? What event happened that made them feel invincible? The North overspeculated and the South did not get affected by it. What event was that? The Panic of 1857. So the Panic of 1857 made them believe that cotton was king. Number 4, they thought it was in the spirit of the Constitution. They said secession was in the spirit of the Constitution. I mean, if you look back at the Declaration of Independence, doesn't it say that it is our right, it is our duty to abolish governments that are tyrannical and corrupt? Well, what is the North trying to do but take away our way of life? It is our right, it is our duty. So he said that secession was in the spirit of the Constitution. And lastly, folks, more important than anything else, why did they secede? To fight for self-government and states' rights. For self-government and states' rights. Because who should decide if they want slavery or not? The states should decide. Not the federal government, not the president, not Congress, who's controlled by who, by the way? The North. That's why. Does that make sense? That's why we don't want Congress to decide, because Congress is dominated by the northern states. The North doesn't get to decide, nor does Congress. The states should decide. They get to decide. Now here's the crazy part, though, folks. Was there a need to secede? No. The quick answer is no, and let me explain why. But if you're asked, well, did they need to secede? The answer is no. They did not need to secede. Let me explain why they did not need to secede. Number 1. The South controlled 5 of the 9 judges in the Supreme Court. So the South controlled the Supreme Court 5-4. So 5 of the justices of the Supreme Court were from the South. Which means, what will the Supreme Court never allow, probably? Abolish slavery. If Congress tries to abolish slavery, what will the Supreme Court do? Nullify it. Judicial review. Nope, can't abolish it. That is an individual right. They have the right to property. In fact, didn't they already decide that? In what Supreme Court case did the Supreme Court already decide that slaves were property and should be legal everywhere? What Supreme Court case did they already decide that? Who can tell me? What Supreme Court case did they already decide? That's Dred Scott. So Dred Scott, the Dred Scott case, already decided that slaves were property. So, as a Southerner, should I be afraid of them getting rid of slavery? No, because the Supreme Court would just overturn it. 2, the other reason why we shouldn't care is that the Republicans, the ones that were afraid might abolish slavery, they don't control Congress. They don't even have a majority. So can the Republican Party alone pass laws? No. Because the House and the Senate are divided by Democrats, Republicans, Constitutional Union Party, Northern Southern Democrats. Are we ever going to get 50% in either house to abolish slavery? No. And besides, don't some Northerners support slavery? So there's no way. So would we even be able to pass a law to eliminate slavery? No. So was there a need to secede? No. But they didn't think about that. They were so quickly, oh my God, Lincoln is elected. Oh, this government is terrible. We better break away. Not realizing they should just calm down and recognize nothing was going to happen to them. They would have kept slavery, and all they had to do was wait Lincoln out for 4 years. Was he a popular president? No. He probably would have lost in 4 years anyway. So if you were just patient and just let Lincoln serve his 4 years, then he would have been voted out of power after 4 years, and some other guy that was cool with slavery would have come into power. But is that what they did? No, they freaked out. They said, oh my goodness, they're going to end slavery now that Lincoln is elected. They didn't look at the numbers or think about the Supreme Court, and they seceded, which was a bad idea on their part. They could have just stayed, but they didn't. Foolish. So, let's talk about the Civil War. A lot of background that we're going to cover today on the Civil War. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today here. Excuse me. But the Civil War lasts from 1861 to 1865. This Civil War. So let's talk about some background real quick here. You don't have to write all this information down. This is just for your reference. If you don't know some of these facts, you should write them down. Most of the stuff is pretty common knowledge, but if you don't know, you might want to write it down. The USA is sometimes known as the Union. President was Lincoln. The capital was Washington, D.C. Their nicknames included the Feds for the federal government, or the Yanks, referencing the fact they were Northern Yankees. And they were called Blue Bellies or Blue Coats because they wore blue coats. By the way, folks, you guys are familiar with the song Yankee Doodle? Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. Do you guys know what that song is actually about?
Talking about writing a white person or something like that?
Nope. Nope.
Like
Yankee Doodle is actually a song written by the British after the French Indian War to make fun of Americans because they thought they were stupid. Think about it. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. Why would he call the feather in his cap macaroni unless he's an idiot? That's what that song's about. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle. Dandy, mind the something, 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 and let the something, something. Most of it is making Americans sound stupid. But that's what the song is about. It's about showing how dumb Americans are. And so that song was written after the French Indian War because the British had such a bad relationship with us. They said, oh, those guys are dumb, and they made a song about it. And yet you hear children singing it every day now. It's Connecticut's, like, state anthem. But it's very, very, what's the word? Insulting to America. So if ever you hear a kid singing Yankee Doodle, he's like, hey, no! You do not sing. This is America! And then, like, you slap them with a flag and be like, America, we don't sing that song here anymore. America the beautiful or nothing. So, yeah. But it's an insulting song if you think about it. So, yeah, fun facts. The Greys were the Confederate States of America, also known as the CSA. President was Jefferson Davis. Their capital was Richmond. The crazy part is that Washington, D.C. and Richmond are only like 100 miles apart. So our capitals were not that far apart from each other. And so at any point, the North or the South could have invaded each of our capitals. And we both tried several times. But our armies were so large in both, we never actually captured either capitals until near the end of the war. The Southerners were called the Rebs or Rebels or Johnny Reb. They were also called Secession because they were secessionists. Secession. They wasn't like, it smells like secession here because, like, you know, a lot of secession in the room. They were called the Gray Coats because they wore gray coats. Also known as Yellow Bellies. Why call them yellow? What does it mean to be yellow? You're yellow. Huh? What does it mean to call someone yellow? Not in the racist way. Not sick. A coward. Yellow-bellied. You're yellow. Yellow dog. You're a cowardly dog. So, Courage the Cowardly Dog.
He's purple, though.
He is purple. Or pink. He's a pinkish, purplish hue. Violet, maybe. Anyway, yellow bellies are cowards. Good? Here we go. Here's the rest of it. Anyway, some of the Southern leaders you need to know. You don't have to know all of them. Here are just a few of them. I'll tell you which ones you have to know. But here are just pictures of all of them. The ones you need to know are General Robert E. Lee. He is the best general at the time. Unfortunately, he fought for the South. But he is the best general of that time period. And unfortunately, Virginia went to the South. Had Virginia remained in the Union, he probably would have fought for the North. But because Virginia went the way of slavery, he went with Virginia. So Robert E. Lee, best general, he's a Confederate. He's the best general we got. Good? Next guy you should know, General Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Also famous general. Why was he called Stonewall? Sort of. His troops were so well disciplined that they would not retreat until he told them to. So they would stand in a straight line and continue firing, and his troops would not retreat until he gave the order to retreat. And he almost never gave the order to retreat. So he would say, if someone falls, you fill up that line and you keep fighting and you don't surrender. So he had well disciplined his troops. So his nickname was Stonewall Jackson because he was like an immovable wall. He would not back down. He would not retreat a single inch. He lost several times. Yeah, he lost a lot of people. But he had that mythos about him, that he was a general that did not surrender. So if you came up against General Stonewall Jackson, you got nervous because the man did not scare easily. So you're like, okay, if we're going to take him, we're going to lose a lot of people before we take him. Because normally if you lose a lot of men, you'll retreat. He never retreated, which means we'll lose a lot of men too. So he was a man that did not retreat. Then you have the northern leaders. Here's just a few. Again, we'll write down the names that we need to know in a second. But here's just all of them on one page real quick. Okay. So, General Ulysses S. Grant. He will eventually become the top general in the North, though not our first choice, nor was he the best general. He was just the one we had left. He is not a good general. He was also a really bad drunk. Horrible drunk. He also did not like getting naked in front of his troops. Now you might wonder, why would they do that anyway? Because when you would shower during the wartime, you had to do it kind of in public, or like, because you had like public showers, right? You don't have like private tents, not like today. And so they would shower kind of like in a tent, like locker room area. But he was so nervous about seeing nude, because he was just a really big deal about him. He would never take a bath or like take a shower with his troops. He'd always do it in the privacy of his own tent, because he was very nervous and shy. So that's General Ulysses S. Grant. Also known as one of our most corrupt presidents. We'll talk about that in a second. In fact, folks, when you have a corrupt president, it's called Grantism. It's named after him. When you have a corrupt president, it's called Grantism. Yeah, so that just shows how corrupt he was. Another really important general, General William Tecumseh Sherman, or just General Sherman. This guy is hardcore. General William T. Sherman, or General William Tecumseh Sherman. This guy was just as crazy as Stonewall Jackson. Where Stonewall Jackson would not surrender, William T. Sherman would not take surrenders. So he would just complete total war and murder everyone. Or at least destroy your entire village. He'd let you live, but he wouldn't give you a place to stay. So we'll talk about him in a second. He was kind of crazy. So let's talk about Southern advantages and disadvantages. So the highs and lows for the South. Let's talk about advantages first. L'avantage du Sud. Southern advantages. L'avantage du Sud. Ready? Southern advantages. First off, it's a defensive war, which means, why is there a benefit? Yeah, home court advantage, right? Home soil. And what don't they have to do? They don't have to travel, and they don't have to win. All they have to do is what? Not lose. Because does a tie count as a win for them? Yeah. So long as the South does not get taken over, they're good. Do they have to take over the North to win? No. They just have to tie. So a defensive war is the best war because all you have to do is not lose. You can tie and it still counts as a win. Also, home court advantage. Another key advantage, they had almost unanimous support. What does it mean, unanimous? Almost everyone. So they had almost unanimous support from Southerners. They had almost unanimous support from the South. The only exception were Appalachian whites. These were Southerners that lived where? In the Appalachian Mountains. And in the Appalachian Mountains, what don't you have? Plantations, because you live in the mountains, and therefore you don't have what? Slaves. So they didn't support the war. Eventually, they're going to break away from Virginia, and they're going to become known as what? West Virginia. So West Virginia today was created because of the Civil War. Another advantage, they had the best generals. They had the best generals. They also had the moral advantage. They had the moral advantage. Why did they have the moral advantage, folks? What were they fighting for? Self-government and states' rights. They're trying to take away our way of life. What are we just supposed to just back down and let them tell us what to do? No! We are fighting for our way of life. We are fighting to govern ourselves. How are we different from the colonists who fought against the British? We are fighting for self-government. So, they had the moral advantage. Also, the South rode horses better. They were better at riding horses, which means what can they use better than the South, or better than the North? Cavalry. They can attack on horse. Do the Northerners ride a lot of horses? In the cities? Not so much. So they have cavalry in the South. So yeah, some advantages, right? Not bad. They got something going on for them. Here are their disadvantages. Southern disadvantages. Disavantage. Number one, few supplies, food, weapons, clothes. Why don't they have a lot of food? Yeah, all they grew was cotton. Who grew all the food in America? The West. And is the West part of the South? No, they're joining the Union. So they have no food. They have some food, right? Subsistence farmers. But can the subsistence farmers feed everyone? Who can the subsistence farmers feed? Themselves. That's why it's called subsistence farming. So they can't feed the entire South, so they don't have enough food. And two, they don't have enough weapons, clothes, shoes. Why not? They don't have very many. They have some factories, but do they have a lot of factories? No. Where are all the factories? In the North. So that's a pretty big disadvantage. Another problem. They have a poor transportation system. They have a poor transportation system, which means what don't they have a lot of in the South? Railroads or roads. Why? Where are all of those? Going in the north to the west, right? Northeast to the west. So not a lot of roads in the South. In fact, they only have about 10,000 miles of road in the South, whereas the North has something like 110,000. So, big difference? Yeah, big difference. Another serious problem. The South only has a population of 11 million. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. They only have a population of 9 million. Here's the problem, though. Yeah, you have a population of 9 million in the entire South, but of that 9 million, some people can't fight. Like who? So children and women and the elderly can't fight. Who else can't fight? The slaves. Of the 9 million, 4.5 million are slaves, which means you only have 4.5 million to fight, of which many are children and women and the elderly. And can all white men go off and fight anyway? Why do some white men have to stay? Because someone has to watch the slaves. Because what might the slaves do if all the white people go off to fight? They might rebel. So is a population going to be a problem for the South? Hugely. Other problems include financial problems. Let's talk about financial problems. Folks, the South had very few banks, and they had very little gold and silver. But still, did they have to make their own money? Can they still use American money? No, they have to use Confederate money. So the South had to print their own money, and in fact, they printed $1 billion of their own money. New money in the South. But the problem is they don't have a lot of gold or silver to back it up. So what's going to happen to their money? It's going to drop in value, right? Like, guys, if I gave you all $1 million in King dollars, here's $1 million King dollars, guys, $1 million King dollars for everyone. Would you be excited about that? Why not? It's worth nothing, and why would it be worth nothing? What don't I have? I have no gold to back it up. But if you knew I had $10 billion in gold, would that piece of paper mean something to you now? Like, oh, so I can exchange this for gold at any time? Like, oh yeah, I'm loaded. Does that make sense, folks? So the problem is, they don't have very much gold and silver, but they're still printing money. So what ended up happening was, what happens when you print a lot of money with nothing to back it up? What do you call that? Inflation. But they didn't have just regular inflation, folks. They had 9,000% inflation. To give you some perspective on what this means, inflation happens all the time. Every year, folks, we have about 2% inflation. That's about natural inflation. If it doesn't happen, that's kind of bad. But here's what this means. Suppose you're going to buy a soda today for $1, okay? Soda costs $1 in the vending machine, just about, right? So let's say all of a sudden we printed $1 billion worth of money and we had 9,000% inflation in America. That soda that cost you $1 yesterday will now cost you $90 today. It doesn't mean that that soda costs more. It just means what? Your paper is worth less. Does that make sense to everyone? That's what's happening. Your paper is now worthless. And so instead of having $1 to buy a soda, you need $90 to buy that soda, because now everyone has money, and if everyone has it, is it worth less? Yes. So problem. Huh? Because, okay, if I give you, because all that money that I'm printing is still dividing the same amount of money that I had before. If this is the amount of gold I have total, and I give you $1, if I have $1 printed, how much is that going to be worth? One piece of gold, right? If I print $2, 2 pieces of gold. $3, 4, 5, and every time I print more money, it becomes a smaller and smaller piece of the gold that I already have. Because I'm not increasing the amount of gold that I have. I still have the same amount of gold. But if I print $1 billion, that means every dollar is a billionth of the gold I already have. And if I have $1 billion worth of gold, then fine, each dollar is worth $1. But if I only have $500,000 worth of gold, that means $1 billion worth of gold is only worth 50 cents. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if I'm not increasing my gold reserves, then the more money I print, the more worthless every piece of paper gets. And the problem is every single state is printing their own money. So what I'm passing out, folks, is examples of Confederate money. These are my copies of Confederate money. These are replicas, but I have an entire folder of Confederate money. Huh? They're replicas. They're not real. The real ones would be worth way too much.
Those aren't real?
No. If I had any real Confederate money, it'd be very expensive. This is still expensive as a collection, but they're not real because that would cost way too much. I mean, they're collector's items either case, but they're pretty good replicas. I don't know. In any case, folks, they tried to fix their financial problems by raising $400 million in war bonds. They tried to raise $400 million in war bonds, which sounds like a lot, but when we look at how much the North raised, you'll realize this is actually nothing compared to what the North was able to do. But they tried to raise about $400 million in war bonds, but that didn't really help at all. War bonds. A war bond is this. Again, folks, here's how a war bond works. If you give me $10 today, I'm going to give this piece of paper to you that says, I promise to give you back $102. I mean, if you give me $10 today, I promise to give you back $12 in 10 years. And so it's a loan to the government that you're giving me. Because when do I need that money? Right now. And when am I going to give it back to you? 10 years from now. Because I need that money right now. But I promise you, I will give you back 2% back in the future. Which is a pretty good deal. Or 20% back. It's a pretty good deal because with stocks, are you guaranteed a return? If I buy a stock in Apple, might I make a lot of money? But could I also lose money? Whereas with a bond, you don't lose money. It's guaranteed. So if I buy a 2% war bond, I'm guaranteed to get 2% back in the future. No matter what happens. Does that make sense to everyone? That's how bonds work. And it's pretty much a loan to the government that says, I need money today to fight a war, but I promise to pay you back in the future. The same works with school bonds, right? If they pass a school bond to improve the school, we want the taxpayers to pay a lot of taxes now to pay for the school, and we promise to give that money back to taxpayers in the future by giving them tax credits back. That's kind of how that works. So they try to raise money with war bonds. But another disadvantage was the Northern blockade. And the North used their navy to prevent the South from what? Huh? Not invading. A blockade prevents the South from what? Trading. It prevents them from trading. Because if this is my harbor, right here, and there are a bunch of northern ships here, am I going to be able to sail? No. The idea was that the Northern blockade was supposed to prevent the South from trading. Another major problem for the South? Cotton was no longer king. Cotton was no longer king. Because was England going to keep buying cotton from the South? Why not? Why were they influenced not to buy Southern cotton anymore? What did they read? Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? And so the South, or England, stops buying Southern cotton because of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And they also find England starts buying cotton from China and India for cheap. So they decide, I'm not going to buy Southern slave cotton anymore. I'm going to buy cotton from India and China, which is still kind of like slavery, but not as bad. Because it's still terrible. The conditions are still bad in China and India at the time. I mean, they're like colonies and whatever else. It's still not good. But they figure it's better than buying from the South. There's no book about Uncle Tom's Cabin in like India or China yet, so no one feels bad about it. It's colonization. That's what happens. Anyway, the last problem is that the Southern government had no control over the Southern states. The Southern government had no control over the Southern states. The Southern government had no control over the Southern states. Because remember, folks, they're fighting for states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. So are the Southern states going to want to give up their rights to the new Confederate States of America? No. In fact, it got so bad, folks, that in the Confederate State Constitution, they had to ban secession. Because if they didn't, the southern states might secede from the Confederate States of America. So they actually had to ban secession in the Confederate States of America because they might secede again. Which is kind of odd if you think about it, because that's the whole reason why they were created. But they said, only that one time. No more secession after that first time. And they banned it in the Constitution. But really, folks, how's the South doing? Are they going to win this war? Are you sure? Because they sound pretty good. Probably not. Northern advantages and disadvantages, then. What is the greatest advantage of the North? Their economy. All those things you guys mentioned, the economy. So the Northern advantage was their economy. First off was industrialization. Because what could they do? Yeah, they can make their own guns, clothes, weapons, tools, supplies, shoes. I mean, they could outproduce the South. 2, what else did the North not have to worry about? They had food. Food was given to them from the West. Because the Western states still provided food. They also had unlimited finances. Unlimited finances. Because they had tons of what in the North? Gold and silver. In fact, folks, the North controlled 3/4 of all U.S. money. All the money in the country, the North controlled 3/4 of it. So, yeah, it's bad that the South left, but are they going to be destroyed because the South left? No. It's going to be hard, but hey, they still control 3/4 of all money. That's not so bad. They began to create an income tax to raise money for the war. So this was a tax on what? What is income, folks? Money you make when you work. So they started taxing people for their income. They also printed over $450 million. They had to print more money. But unlike the South that had to deal with 9,000% inflation, the South only had 80% inflation. So is that nearly as bad? No. 9,000% inflation is $1 to $90 the next day. The North only dealt with 80% inflation, which meant $1 today, tomorrow it's $1.80. Is that so bad? No, it's not bad. It's like 80 cents more. I can deal with that during wartime. That's a big difference from $90 versus $1.80. So again, big difference there. Clear? Okay. Other advantages, folks. They also made $2.5 billion in war bonds. How much did the South make in war bonds? Only 400. The North made $2.5 billion in war bonds. So pretty good. Just a little bit more. 6 times more. This is the North. Other advantages. They had a better transportation system because they had lots of what in the North? Roads, railroads, canals. So they had a better transportation system in the North. Why is the transportation system good? Oh, they can trade, ship goods, guns, materials, move soldiers. Very good for them. They had a strong navy. Why is having a good navy important? So they can have the blockade. They had a strong navy to blockade the South. Also, they had a larger population. 22 million was in their population in the North. And what didn't they have to worry about? Slaves. So lots of people fighting in the North. Yes. Sure. So some of their disadvantages. So some of the disadvantages then. Terrible generals. Terrible generals. Just the worst. Not good. I'll read you off their names. You don't actually have to know them. But first we had General Winfield Scott, who was replaced by General McClellan, who was replaced by General Halleck, who was replaced by General Pope, who was replaced by General Grant. Grant was not our first choice. He just was the last one left. Our generals were terrible in the North. They refused to follow directions. They were bad at strategizing. They were just incompetent. So our Northern generals sucked. It's not that we were lucky at winning, because we could literally just throw people at the South. But we didn't have to lose as many lives as we did. It was just that our generals were terrible. So that was bad. 2, we had to fight on foreign soil, which is always hard. We had to fight on foreign soil. And 3, no unanimous support. There was no unanimous support. Because did everyone support the war in the North? No. You had 2 groups who opposed the war. The Peace Democrats, they opposed the war. By the way, there are war Democrats in favor of the war. But you have the Peace Democrats who support the war. Oppose the war. And then you also have the Copperheads, who also oppose the war, but they oppose the war violently. Like, they will sabotage equipment, and they will break down wagons and destroy equipment and all that stuff. So you have the Peace Democrats that just try to vote against the war, and then you have the Copperheads that violently oppose the war. I just don't like it at all. Good with the pros and cons? Okay. Here's Lincoln fighting. Lincoln's boxing against Jefferson Davis. So about Lincoln's inauguration then. So in 1861 in March, Lincoln finally gets to be president of the United States. And it took him a while because of what period again? What's that period called? When he doesn't get to be president? From November to March. What do we call that period? The lame duck. Lame duck period. So he finally gets to become president. An interesting story. Lincoln arrived in Washington, D.C. on a midnight train in disguise. Why? Because there were already several assassination attempts on Lincoln. They did not want Lincoln to be president, so they attempted to assassinate him. What I really like about this picture, though, is that you see that the Capitol is still being constructed. Like, they haven't finished the Capitol Rotunda yet, so they're still finishing construction, which I think is kind of cool, because it's Lincoln's inauguration, and yet you still notice that it's not done yet, which I think is kind of neat. Anyway, so Lincoln gets inaugurated. And the first battle begins, the Battle of Fort Sumter. This is the first battle of the war, and what you should know is that Fort Sumter is in South Carolina. So let me explain what's happening here. Fort Sumter was pro-North. Okay? Fort Sumter was pro-North or pro-Union. But unfortunately, where are they? They're in the South. So again, Fort Sumter is pro-Union or pro-North, but unfortunately, they're in South Carolina in the middle of the South. Well, they're running out of supplies. And does Lincoln want to give up on Fort Sumter? No, because if Lincoln gives up Fort Sumter, what's going to happen to all those guns, bullets, cannons, whatever else? They're going to go to the South. And so Lincoln refuses to give it up. But can he just let these people die? No, so Lincoln tells Jefferson Davis, I'm not invading. All I'm doing is I want to resupply Fort Sumter with food. I'm just going to bring them food so they can continue to hold Fort Sumter. We're not invading. We're not attacking. All we're doing is resupplying Fort Sumter. Good so far. So Lincoln even tells Jefferson Davis, we're not invading. We're just resupplying. But the South sees the Union Army marching on Fort Sumter, and what does the South decide to do? The South opens fire, and on April 12th, 1861, the South opens fire on Fort Sumter. On April 12th, 1861, the South opened fires on Fort Sumter. This, by the way, here is Fort Sumter. And all we're trying to do is resupply it, but the South says no, and they open fire. Here they are, open fire, and they really take a huge beating from the South because they don't have anything left, but they're just there. But this was actually a mistake on the South's part because this starts the Civil War. But the important part is who started it? The South. And that is the most important thing. The significance of Fort Sumter, folks, is that the South was the aggressor. The South was the aggressor. The South fired first. And that is so important because who doesn't look like the bad guy anymore? The North. Lincoln can say, aha! They fired first. I don't look like the bad guy. Did I force their hand? Did I make them shoot first? No, I didn't. They fired on us, and we were just trying to resupply. So now do we have an excuse to go to war? All the time before this, we were just trying to figure out how do we start this war. But now, the South started it. Yes?
Were they really going to, resupply?
Yes. They were, because Lincoln did not want a war. He was hoping somehow we could figure this out. But South Carolina fired first, and Lincoln said, okay, if it's a war that's going to end this, then war it's going to be. So, the South fired first. And the reason why this is significant is because of the border states. Because the South fired first, the border states decided to remain in the Union. And the border states are Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. So the reason why the Battle of Fort Sumter is so important is that because the South fired first, the border states decided to stay in the Union. And the border states, folks, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware, these border states, why are they so important that they remain in the Union? What do they have? They're slave-owning states. But these are slave states that remained in the Union. Because Lincoln made it very clear when war was declared, why are we fighting this war? Or rather, Lincoln said, we're not fighting this war to do what? We are not fighting this war to end slavery. Lincoln said the reason why we're fighting this war is to restore the Union. That's why this war is being fought, to restore the Union. It is not to free the slaves. Because if this war was to free the slaves, what would have not happened? Would the border states have joined the Union? No. Say, free the slaves. Well, those are my slaves too. Nope, I'm not going to do it. But instead, Lincoln said, this war is being fought not to free the slaves. This war is being fought to do what? Restore the Union. It's not about slavery. Just like the South, it's not about slavery. It's about states' rights and self-government. The North also felt the same. This is not a war about slavery. This is a war about restoring the Union. Now, it's really important that the border states joined the Union and did not remain in the South, and here's why. The border states had half of the southern population. The border states also had half their horses. And the border states also had 2/3 of their factories. So again, the border states had half the southern population, they had half the southern horses, and they had half the southern factories. So if the border states had remained in the South, might the South had a better chance of winning? Maybe. They would have had a better chance at least. But because they lost half their horses, half their population, 2/3 of their factories, the South really did lose a lot from these 4 states. And the North was happy about it. But to make clear how important the border states were to Lincoln, he said the following. Here's a quote from Lincoln about the border states. He said, "I think to lose Kentucky is nearly the same as to lose the whole game. Kentucky gone, we cannot hold Missouri, not, I think, Maryland. These all against us, and the job on our hands is too large for us. We would as well consent to separation at once, including the surrender of this capital, Washington, D.C." So the fear was if we lost the border states, what was probably going to happen? We would have lost the war. And here's the really important reason why, folks. Washington, D.C., folks, is right here. So they already controlled Virginia. But if they also controlled Maryland, where would Washington, D.C. be now? Right in the center of the South. Would we be able to hold it? No. But because we controlled Maryland, we controlled the northern part of D.C., the Southern controlled the southern part, and we could at least hold them off. But if Maryland also went to the South, we lost D.C. and we probably lost the war, and that means we would have never won. We probably would have just ended the war right there. So we got lucky. We got lucky there. So Lincoln starts fighting the war, and he puts the Constitution on hold. What does that mean? Well, Lincoln did some unconstitutional things. They did some cartoons making fun of Lincoln because everyone hated Lincoln. Like, everyone hated Lincoln. It was really sad. But everyone hated Lincoln at the time. Lincoln put the Constitution on hold because he did some unconstitutional things. Like one, he increased the military without congressional approval. Whose job is it to increase the military? Nope. Not Secretary of War. Not the President. It's Congress's job. Congress has the power to raise an army, according to the Constitution. Lincoln did it without asking Congress. Is that unconstitutional? Sure is. But Lincoln said, look, I am fighting a war, and I don't have time to wait for you guys to debate whether or not to increase the army. I'm going to do it because it needs to be done. So you might complain about it being unconstitutional or not, but history will agree with me because it needs to happen now. So Lincoln did some unconstitutional stuff, like again, he increased the military without congressional approval. He banned anti-war newspapers. He banned anti-war newspapers, which takes away what? Freedom of speech and press. But he says, you know what, I don't care. We need to win this war, and is it going to help if we have the public opposing the war? No. So we're going to take away the freedom of the press if that means winning this war. Now, is that a good thing? No? Yes. He suspended or he banned anti-war newspapers. He banned anti-war newspapers, which again takes away freedom of the speech and press. Not good. What if President Bush banned all anti-war newspapers during the Iraq and Afghanistan invasions? Would that be bad? Definitely. But Lincoln did it. Other things that Lincoln did that are kind of unconstitutional. He suspended what is known as the writ of habeas corpus. He suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Now, habeas corpus in Latin means show me the body. Let me explain why. If you are going to get arrested for something, what do I have to have in order to arrest you? Evidence. So if I'm going to put you in jail for murder, what do I need to have? A body. Otherwise, you can't arrest me for murder. Do you have a body? No. So the writ of habeas corpus said, show me the body. It meant you had to have evidence to arrest someone. Lincoln suspended that, which means what? He arrested people without evidence. You're probably helping the South. You're going to jail. You're probably helping the South. You're going to jail. And then you were guilty until proven innocent. Try to figure that out for a second. Prove to me you didn't do it. Well, I wasn't there. Do you have proof that you weren't there? How do you prove that you didn't do something?
So you bought like gas.
I get, but it's difficult though, right? It's easier to prove that you did something versus didn't do something. So you have to prove that you were somewhere else. Like, how do I know this is fake? How do I know this is not fake? Right, guys? How do I know this is yours? How do I know a friend of yours didn't do it? That's not proof that you're innocent. So you're guilty until proven innocent, which is not fair, but that's what Lincoln did. So they suspended the writ of habeas corpus. And lastly, he used military trials. He used military courts or military trials even when civil courts were available. He used military trials even when civil courts were available. He used military trials or military courts even when civil courts were available. Let me give you an example, folks. During wartime, let's say you got arrested, I don't know, for shoplifting. Would you want a jury of your peers, or would you want the military to be your jury? Peers, right? You want someone who understands you, not the military who wants to end this quick. But Lincoln said, no, it's wartime. The military will decide. You guys have no civil trials at the moment. Again, is that good? No, but Lincoln said, it's wartime. And I have things I need to do. I got to end this war quickly. So your rights go out the window. Well, folks, in 1866, real quick here, the Supreme Court ruled that military courts cannot be used if civil courts are available. It ruled that military courts cannot be used if civil courts are available. So again, Ex parte Milligan ruled that military courts cannot be used if civil courts are available. So again, if I arrested you, can I use a military court? No. But what if there was a nuclear bomb blast that destroyed all the civil courts? Can I then use a military court? Sure, because the civil court system doesn't work anymore. But if the civil court system works, do I have to use them? Yes. This is a major debate today, though, because you remember those terrorists that we arrested from like Afghanistan, Pakistan, whatever? We're not trying all of them in military courts. In civil courts. We're trying them in special military courts. And the Supreme Court is ruling whether or not that is constitutional. That if these are foreign combatants, do we get to try them in civil courts or military courts? So that's something that our Supreme Courts are still deciding today. Let's talk about soldiers. The Union soldiers. Well, folks, people fighting for this war were mostly volunteers. But once we started running out of soldiers, what did we need to do? We had to have conscription laws. What are conscription laws? It's the same, folks, as a mandatory draft. And what's the military draft, folks? If a war breaks out and we don't have enough soldiers, what is the federal government allowed to do? Force you into the military. Like, they'll put all your names in like a bingo type thing. They'll spin it around and they'll start pulling names. Okay, you, and you all now have to report for duty. You will go to jail. They will put you in jail. That's what happened during Vietnam. When people's names were pulled for Vietnam, many people fled to Canada. Others were put in jail. They're called draft dodgers. By the way, that's why the Dodgers are named. Because they were draft dodgers. Yeah, isn't that weird? Like, oh, hey, you are not doing your civic duty. And I like the Dodgers. But their name is named after not doing their job. Anyway, mandatory draft. It would force people in the military because they started running out of volunteers. Now, some people could buy a $300 exemption. So some people could buy a $300 exemption, which means who didn't have to fight? The wealthy. All you had to do was pay $300 and you don't have to fight in the war. So that's not fair. Of course they can. Of course they can. They can buy a $300 exemption? Huh? Today? No, you can't do that today. They also, and because of this, folks, because people were being forced into the military, had a lot of draft riots. The most famous was the New York draft riot, in which thousands of people rioted because they were being forced to fight in the war. This kind of happened also during Vietnam War as well. But who in New York did not want to fight in this war? The Irish. The Irish especially did not want to fight in the war. So they rioted a lot. This is all in the north. Yeah. They also had a group known as the bounty brokers. And the bounty brokers' job was that they would get paid $1,000 to enlist others. So if I got you to sign up for a war, I got $1,000. So bounty brokers were paid $1,000 to enlist. Yes.
Were the Irish considered citizens in the U.S.?
Were the Irish considered citizens? Once they became citizens, the Irish would be given once they were given citizenship, they'd be asked to fight in the war. In some cases, once the Irish got off the boat from Ireland, right at the dock, they'd be like, "Welcome to America. You're an American citizen. Put on this hat and uniform. Here's your gun. Go fight for your country." So like the second they'd land, they put them on another boat to go fight in the South. So many Irish people hated this war. They're like, "Oh, this is America." Got it. But bounty brokers were paid $1,000 to enlist others. What many of them would do is they get people really drunk and get them to sign up. They would trick them and get them to sign up. Other times, they would sign up the same person over and over again. Like they would take some guy, bring him into a store, sign him up, take him out, shave off his beard, bring him back in, take him out, put on a hat, take him in, put him out, change his clothes, bring him in, take him out. He'd sign up people over and over again. In fact, there's one guy that signed up the same person 32 times. He was taking them to different offices and different outfits and just sign them up over and over and over again. And we don't have computers. There's no way to track what people are doing in different stations. And so he signed up the same guy 32 times. The same guy. Not even like multiple guys over 32 times. The same guy 32 times. Different outfits, different stations, over and over again. So that's what's happening in the North. The North also had the benefit of 180,000 black soldiers willing to fight. 180,000 free blacks chose to fight in this war because do they have the most to gain from this? Most definitely. Like losing the war was almost unimaginable. If they lost this war, they just thought, well, what does that mean for us then if we lose this war? So they had to win this war. Something you should know real quick, folks, is this is a map of blacks fighting in the South, which means, did they actually fight in battle? Yes. Many blacks did serve in combat, so something you should know is that they did serve in combat. Some blacks were some of the most decorated. What does it mean to be decorated in the military? A lot of awards, medals, honors. That means that they fought in some really hard combat. So some of them did do manual labor, like they would use them like slaves. Okay, we're going to have you dig a trench. We're going to have you build a road. So some of them did use manual labor, but they did fight in combat. They were highly decorated. Many of them were killed in battle. The most famous example is the 54th Massachusetts. It's an all-black regiment or all-black army as part of the U.S. Are you guys familiar with the movie Glory?
Yeah.
Glory is based on the 54th Massachusetts. So, again, this was an all-black army. And people always ask, were they racist to them also? The answer is yes. Even the white Union troops were racist to the black Union troops. They weren't just like best friends all of a sudden. Some people learned to like them and respect them, but it took a lot. Because remember, folks, they're still racist. This is still something that's been around for years. And so trying to eliminate that racism is going to take some time because it's been prevalent for a really long time in America. So the North had a total of 2.1 million soldiers. So for the North, a total of 2.1 million soldiers. But most of the soldiers were what, though? Most Union soldiers were what? Were they draftees or were they what? Most were volunteers. Because look, only 164,000 were drafted, which means the vast majority were volunteers. In terms of total deaths, folks, what killed them? Disease more than anything else. Like, if you got shot by a bullet, the bullet's not what killed you. It's the gangrene that kills you, the infection that killed you. If you got shot in the leg, cutting off your leg is what killed you. You know, that's what killed you. It wasn't the actual bullet, it was the surgery or the treatment that killed you. Because, again, did we have antiseptics back then? Like, if you got infected, you're going to die. Because, we cut off your leg or it's infected and you're in the battlefield. Are battlefields clean? Nope. And so many people died from battlefield wounds. Confederate soldiers, what did they deal with? Again, also mostly volunteers. Mostly volunteers, but they did have, just like the North, they also had conscription laws. So they also had what in the North or South? A draft, good. Just like in the North, who probably didn't have to fight? The wealthy. There's actually an unfortunately named law in the South at the time. It was called the 20 Nigger Law. And what the law stated was if you owned 20 slaves, what didn't you have to do? Fight in the war. Because you had to stay and watch over the slaves. And so typically, who didn't have to fight? The wealthy didn't have to fight. The poor had to fight. So just like always, folks, it's a rich man's war being fought by who? The poor man, or the common man. So that's mostly the South. They made up over 800,000. Is there a big difference in the numbers? 800,000 versus 2.1 million? Yeah. Big difference in numbers here. Yep. Civil War women. Women did participate somewhat in the war. They had their roles. Many women worked in factories. So that helped because they made stuff while the men were fighting in the war. Many women served as spies. Steal plans, sleep with men, and then take, tell me, what are you guys doing tomorrow? No, really. Many women served as what? What's the most famous role for women at this time? Nurses. Most definitely. The most famous nurse? Clara Barton. That started what organization? That's still used today. That comes to our school twice a year? The Red Cross. So Clara Barton served as a nurse. So did Dorothea Dix and Elizabeth Blackwell, who served as a doctor at the time. But they served as medical staff. And some women also served in the military. 400 women served as soldiers, posing as men. And when they were found out, they would be kicked out because women weren't allowed to serve. But some women tried to fight in the war. They would pose as men, and they would fight. Kind of like a Mulan thing going on. Yeah. Similar to Mulan. but not without the dragon and the cricket and the ancestors and all that stuff. And without the singing. Cool. So, when looking at the North versus Southern economy, folks, let's just see what the advantages and disadvantages are one more time. With regard to population, who wins? The North. With regard to railroad, who wins? With regard to factories, who wins? With regard to farms, who wins? With regard to wealth, who wins? With regard to iron, who wins? With regard to cotton, who wins? Well then. Clearly the South is going to win this war. Because they have 95% of cotton. I mean, think of all the stuff they can make with cotton. Cotton bullets, cotton guns, cotton shoes, cotton soldiers. I mean, so many things they can do with cotton. Folks, these numbers alone, does that explain why the North won this war? I mean, really, the numbers don't lie. This is why the North wins. Hands down, the North dominated this war. Even with 95% of cotton, did that mean anything? No, it meant nothing. And so this is why the North won. And so, folks, we're going to go ahead and talk about the key battles of the war. But before we do, I'm going to show you guys a quick video. Just to give you guys an idea of what the war looks like. 4 minutes, and then we'll talk about the war again thereafter. So, let's do that real quick. Other way. There you go. So, the key battles of the Civil War, we'll cover just a few today. The first is the Battle of Bull Run. This is the first real battle of the war. And the Union lost. This is the first battle, or the real battle of the Civil War. And the Union lost. And because the Union lost, it made the North realize that this was going to be a long war. Because they could crush them instantly. Done. But because the Union lost, they realized this was going to be a long war. And how did winning this battle affect the South? Yeah, it made them feel confident. It made them feel invincible. So the Battle of Bull Run was a Union defeat. And again, it made the South overconfident. And it made the North realize that it was going to be a long war. Something else that you should know that's kind of weird about the Battle of Bull Run is that no one knew what to expect from this war. They thought it was going to be like something interesting to watch. So all along the hillsides, folks, there were families with picnic baskets watching the battle because they thought it would be entertaining to watch, like something to do with their families. This was the only time they ever did that because they didn't realize that this battle was going to be bloody and terrible and horrifying. They thought, oh, it'll be like the stories that we hear about the American Revolution, those romantic stories of battle. But it was nothing like that. So the Battle of Bull Run, where no one really knew what the war was going to be about, they picnicked to watch and spectate what the war was going to be like first. They never did it again because they realized how horrible war was after that. Tip, don't take your kids to watch war. Like, not good. So, the Northern strategy was called the Anaconda Plan. Okay? The Northern strategy was called the Anaconda Plan. Because what do anacondas do? They wrap around and they suffocate, right? That was the Anaconda Plan. That was the plan of the North. Here's what the Anaconda Plan included. Number one, how are they going to block them off here? So the first part, a blockade. First part of the Anaconda Plan, a naval blockade. Then, part two. What did they do next that you guys saw in the video once they blockaded the South? They divided them at the Mississippi River. They divided the South at the Mississippi River. They divided the South at the Mississippi River. That's step 2. And then, once they divided them at the Mississippi River, what were they going to do again? Divide them even further, right? Because again, it was right here. They were going to divide them again even further. So again, the plan after Mississippi River was divide and conquer. It's a simple plan, hard to execute, but it's a good plan nonetheless. So Anaconda Plan, good plan? I would say so. This blockade prevented them from trading. This blockade here prevented them from receiving what? Food from the West. And this invasion here, it prevented them from helping each other. It's a great plan. Really good idea. And so, folks, that's the Anaconda Plan. You should definitely know it. And we'll end there for today. We'll finish up the Civil War on Thursday. We'll start Reconstruction. And we should be done with this unit on Thursday, if not by Monday. But we're pretty much done with this.